When I was a little kid, I want to be a baseball player. This is something that I think about. The more I think about it, I'm convinced that God wants me to play baseball.
Puerto Rico is the shining star of the Caribbean, but its natural beauty belies a sometimes turbulent past. Still, Puerto Ricans are an enduring people with a passion for music and literature and sports, especially baseball.
God wants me to play baseball.
Falling pretty fast out there. Caught by Clemente with a tremendous sliding catch.
Playing right field, number 21, Roberto Clemente.
I can't think of any other player that I've ever played with that had that much pride. He was proud to be Puerto Rican. He was proud to be Roberto Clemente.
Roberto Clemente, the kid from Carolina, who became the greatest right fielder the game of baseball has ever seen.
Great player from Puerto Rico, one of the first great Latin American players, and on the field, he was a breathtaking performer.
Despite an unorthodox batting style, the Pirates great won 4 batting crowns and amassed 3,000 career hits.
He could run, he could hit, he could throw. We used to go out and watch Roberto throw during infield practice.
In my opinion, to me, Roberto Clemente was the best player I ever seen playing this game.
Most of the time I jump into the ball, and I think that I can hit all kind of pitches.
He could run, he could hit, he could throw, he could excite you.
Say he's the greatest ball player I've ever seen.
He was a hustler and battling buck-off. And fans in Pittsburgh appreciate effort, all-out effort.
He runs with abandon. You can see that. He was a force. And in the post-World War II era, he is #1 in triples.
He played with unparalleled grace during turbulent times, with passion and pride that were often misunderstood.
He was so much more than just a baseball player. There's pottery that he made. He was a pottery student, learning how to do that. Musician, billiards player. We have his automobile, his 1972 Dodge Charger that he won as the MVP.
.331 batting average, .377 on base, and even in that run-starved time period, he slugged .507. .146 in that time period, right in between Reggie Jackson and Willie Stargell.
He liked to use foul line to foul line. If the guy was throwing exceptionally hard, he wouldn't try and pull him. He would hit the ball where it's pitched and could hit it as hard as anyone to the opposite field. And when he pulled the ball, he could pull it and hit it as far as anyone. That's what kind of hitter Roberto was.
You have one of the top 3 players of the 1960s. Now, nobody was talking wins above replacement in those days. They just said, hey, Aaron, Mays, Clemente, they were the all-around greats.
He would compile a higher batting average in the decade than either Hank Aaron or Willie Mays. His fellow Latin American players had found a hero.
The National League was the exciting league in the 60s, and Clemente was a big reason why.
Clemente's next 13 seasons may have been the best 13 seasons of any player's career.
61 to 1972, only Hank Aaron and Willie Mays had a higher WAR, wins above replacement, than Roberto Clemente.
When it means the big game, Clemente's going to be the star of the game. I don't care what ball club, what all-star club, or what. Clemente's going to be the star.
He was unique. Clemente played in a way that none of those other great players of that era, Mays, Aaron, or Mantle, did. He was beauty in motion. If you saw Clemente play, you would never forget it.
What was it like to see in person?
He was incredible, Brian, and I played against him in the 1971 Puerto Rican Championships.
I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who have said the same story. They'll say, I was at Shea Stadium, or I was at Wrigley Field, or I was at Candlestick Park, or I was at Forbes Field or Three Rivers Stadium. or County Stadium in Milwaukee, or Chavez Ravine. And I saw Roberto Clemente go deep into the corner in right field and pick up a ball and throw it on a perfect rope to third base or home plate.
A brilliant outfielder with a rifle arm.
You saw Clemente play right field, and particularly that arm, that golden arm he had.
Also known for having the best arm in baseball, he and Al Kaline were known for being the top weapons at a right field.
Where he displayed a precise and powerful arm.
And for a generation, the 1966 MVP showed the world how to play right field.
I don't think you could have a stronger, more accurate arm from right field. You had to be very, very careful with your turn at first base, because if Clemente would come up throwing, you didn't know whether he was going to throw behind you or in front of you.
We were amazed at that outstanding arm. You know, he used to gun that thing all the way from right field to home plate on the fly, and he liked to show it off a little bit.
I remember in one game, Willie Mays hitting a single to right field and rounding first and bang.
Everything about Clemente was a little different, and it was beautiful and unforgettable.
His great range, his sliding catches against the fence, and of course, his arm. An arm that had no equal, not then and not since.
Defensive metrics were crude back then, but Clemente did lead the National League right fielders in zone rating 10 separate years, 10 times.
Roberto Clemente had a gun for a right arm. This guy played right field.
He is the all-time Major League Baseball assist leader among right fielders.
And if you even thought about taking an extra base on a hit out to right field, you better think again, because he could gun you down at second base, third base, or at home.
Clemente was much more than hitting. He was held in awe because of his fielding and base running. He didn't steal bases, but he had an extra bases taken percentage of 55% for his career. That's extremely high.
Clemente in the outfield was an epic poem.
He hit the wall head first, caught the ball, tumbled down, held on to it. I said, Roberto, I've seen you play a lot of games. It's the best catch I've ever seen you make. And he said proudly, if the ball is in the park and the game is on the line, I will catch the ball.
He knew what he could do. He was sure no one was better than he was. And he was out there to prove it.
And he hit 600 in the playoffs. He was unbelievable. .5'11", 175.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's all the comparisons to Vladimir Guerrero. He was a much smaller guy than Guerrero with terrific baseball skills.
You look at his body, my God, nothing could happen to that body. It was like a brand new car that was never driven.
But people don't realize Bobby was built like a Greek god. He had a waist about that big around and marvelous through the chest. Very strong shoulders, strong arms. Great timing, great instinct.
Roberto Clemente quietly became one of the top players in baseball, winning 12 Gold Glove awards, 4 batting titles, and leading the Pirates to 2 World Series championships.
For all of that, to reduce Clemente to numbers is to do him a disservice. Clemente was art, not science.
Quite simply, Roberto Clemente was the great one.
Roberto Clemente was born on August 18th, 1934.
In Carolina, Puerto Rico.
By the age of 19, he played for the Santurce Crabbers in the Puerto Rican Winter League.
The youngest of 7, Roberto learned early the value of work. He often accompanied his father to his foreman's job at the local sugar mill.
8 or 9, he wanted a bicycle and apparently carried heavy containers of milk for a neighbor every morning and every evening and got a penny in the morning and a penny and saved $20-some to buy a bicycle.
Roberto identified a lot with the strugglers. He used to tell me taxi drivers, people who work in the factories, guys who pick up the garbage. He respected those people. He told me more than once, the people who struggle are the people who know the true essence of what to be alive is.
Do you think that Major League Baseball should retire Roberto Clemente's number?
No. Why?
Well, I just think.
Well, I mean, I don't understand. Why would they retire Roberto Clemente's number?
Throughout baseball, I think because of what he's did for the Latin American ball players and stuff like that.
I don't understand. What did he do?
I love people, and I love the minority people. I love people that they are not big shots. I like common people. I like workers. I like people that suffer, because these people, they have a different approach of life, of the people that they really have everything in life, that sometimes they get bored because they have everything and they don't know what suffering is in life.
The Puerto Rico of the 40s and 50s provided the backdrop for Clemente's youth. The son of a sugarcane worker, Clemente loved baseball, and every chance he got, he would watch the Negro League teams that played on the island. His favorite player was Monty Irvin.
I first met Roberto Clemente in the early 40s in Puerto Rico. I used to play down there, and this is when I was in the old Negro Leagues. And he was just a youngster, and one day I let him carry my bag in order to get into the stadium. So we became friendly. Used to give him a ball. I don't know, I might have given him a glove that I had, but I never did see him play.
But in high school, people came from all over to see the talented Clemente. Fellow Puerto Rican Orlando Cepeda recalls.
I remember Roberto in 1952 or 51. He used to play amateur ball. Before that, he used to play softball. Everybody talked about how good he was. You know, he used to run track, throw, the javelin, everything. But he was a shortstop. So my father used to be the manager of a team called Juncos, a well-known team in Puerto Rico. It used to be like the Yankees. Everybody wants to play for Juncos team. The best player in the whole island wanted to play for the team. So we have a guy in shortstop, he was established. So he said, no, don't sign him, let him go back to play more ball because he's very talented. He came back 2 years later and played for the same team for Juncos. And then from Juncos, he signed with Santurce.
Clemente's first professional contract called for a $400 signing bonus and a weekly salary of $40. He had made the team on the strength of a tryout that was held by the Brooklyn Dodgers. At the urging of a local scout, Pedrin Zorilla, the Dodgers had sent their scout, Al Campanis, to see Clemente.
He caught the eye of Brooklyn scout Al Campanis, who signed the 19-year-old for $10,000 in February of 1954.
2 years later, at 19, Clemente signed with the Dodgers and went to their AAA team in Montreal.
Clemente signed with the Dodgers in 1954. They'd scouted him and thought he had enormous talent. But because of that potential, the Dodgers actually tried to hide him up in Montreal, and they would not play him.
Since his signing bonus exceeded $4,000, and he was in the minors, he could be drafted by another team after the season. Hoping to avoid this, Brooklyn tried to hide him from other teams.
Clemente was the best-kept secret in baseball.
Whenever we saw scouts come into the ballpark, we didn't play him. He was on deck. And I saw about 5 or 6 scouts, and I hollered to the manager, and I pointed. He took Clemente out for a pinch hitter in the bottom of the first inning. And that young man was really upset.
We sit there, and he said, Joey, what's wrong with the Dodgers? They don't let me play.
But Branch Rickey, Pittsburgh's general manager, wasn't fooled by his former club. He knew all about Clemente, and since Pittsburgh had first pick in the draft, Rickey sent scout Howie Hake to Montreal to get a first-hand look at the young Roberto.
He wanted to play bad. He was very disappointed that he wasn't playing more, I know that. He wanted to play real bad.
They didn't play Clemente. He went to bat 4 times while I was there. And I was there from August till the season ended and into the playoffs.
When he was in the minor leagues with the Dodgers, if too many scouts came to the game, it was ridiculous. The Dodger manager didn't play him.
Roberto got mad because he'd have a good day and then he'd be on the bench the following day. They were hiding him. So one day Roberto left the stadium, went back to the hotel to get his stuff to come back to Puerto Rico.
But Hake tried to convince Roberto to stay.
So I went down to the hotel and he didn't speak too good English. I didn't know anything in Spanish. I mean, I'm trying to talk to him, come on back to the ballpark. If you want to play in the major leagues next year, you better come out to the ballpark with me. So I took him back to the ballpark. They never even missed him. By the time he got ready and got dressed, they were through with infield practice and ready to start the game.
When the season ended, Branch Rickey succeeded in stealing Clemente away from his former club. And for $4,000, the Pirates had bought themselves the man who would become the greatest right fielder in the game.
Despite the Dodgers' efforts to hide his talent, Clemente was picked first by the cellar-dwelling Pirates in the December 1954 draft of minor leaguers.
Roberto Clemente was signed by the Pittsburgh Pirates, where he made his big league debut and where he spent the rest of his career.
I had got the job to work in Pittsburgh in May of '66, and Jimmy Cannon was one of the fellows that recommended me for the job in Pittsburgh. He says to me, says, you know, you're going to a town that might have the best player in baseball and nobody knows.
In 1955, Clemente debuted with the Pirates. He was coming off his only minor league season and right away broke into the starting lineup. As a rookie, Roberto hit a modest .255, but he was full of talent, and his teammates saw a star in the making.
Well, I've always said, after playing with Bobby from 55 through 62, that Bobby Clemente was the greatest God-given talent I ever saw on a baseball diamond. There wasn't anything that he couldn't do as well, if not better, than anybody in the game that I have ever seen.
He ran, he threw, he hit, and he fielded.
He had a totally different style than anybody. He ran different, he sort of galloped, and of course his basket catch was totally different then, and he was just different.
I can recall, I mean, the guy had so much talent, we could see it, you know, and really for a first-year man, he had a lot of confidence.
In that 1960 season, Clemente batted .314 and drove in 94 runs. The Pirates had finally come together, getting a brilliant season from the league's batting champion, shortstop Dick Grote, who hit .325. Among the pitching stars were 20-game winner Vernon Law and reliever Elroy Face, who saved 24 games. As Pittsburgh won its first pennant in 33 years, a proud Clemente was more than ready to lead his upstart Pirates into the World Series against the heavily favored New York Yankees. To everyone's surprise, Pittsburgh was equal to the task. Clemente got a hit in every game and batted .310. His biggest hit coming in the 8th inning of Game 7 when the Pirates were down by 2.
The move, the 1-2 to Clemente. He swings the ground ball, slowly hit off the first base side, charging him down. He makes the pickup, there'll be no play, and a run scored. And the 2-2 to Smith. He swings a long fly ball deep to left field. I don't know, it might go out of here. It is going, gone. Ford Field is at this moment an outdoor insane asylum. We have seen and shared in one of baseball's great moments.
But unbelievably enough, that moment was overshadowed in the bottom of the 9th when second baseman Bill Mazeroski cut loose.
Here's a swing and a high fly ball going deep to left. This may do it. Back to the wall goes Berra. It is over the fence, home run. The Pirates win.
Thanks to one swing of Mazeroski's bat, the Pirates, against overwhelming odds, were world champions. As his teammates reveled in their unlikely victory, Roberto Clemente was not among them. He had dressed and gone out into the October afternoon to be with the fans. I did not feel like a player at the time, he said. I felt like one of those persons, and I walked the streets among them.
I want to be with the people that pay my salary. Because I was with my players, I shake hands with them and everything like that. I talk to them that how happy I was and everything like that. But to me, I felt I want to be outside with the fans. So I was criticized for that.
Although it took just 6 years for Pittsburgh to win the World Series with Clemente, it took longer for him to be welcomed by his teammates.
He didn't go out of his way to come to us, and we didn't go out of our way to go to him. So both ends just, it didn't gel.
Bobby was on the bus, and we joked and had fun around the batting cage and so forth. but it wasn't like he went out to dinner with us after the games. Bobby kind of lived in his own world.
Some of the guys don't even know where Puerto Rico was. They probably thought Puerto Rico was a jungle.
He never let anybody call him Bob. He said Roberto. He corrected everybody that said to him, "Hey, Bob." He said Roberto.
As part of the first large Latino wave to play in the majors, Puerto Rican Roberto Clemente faced a language and cultural barrier that played out on the Pittsburgh sports pages of 1955 in derision, ignorance, and bad taste.
He'd use a phrase, say like, I hit the ball, and they would print H-E-E-T instead of H-I-T.
They quoted him as though he were Tarzan. Meet Tarzan, you Jane.
He felt it was a form of mockery, or he was being made to look like some kind of exotic character, and he didn't feel like one. He just felt like a man who deserved a certain amount of respect.
I have a feeling those old-time beat writers cleaned up the quotes of a lot of the good old Southern boys.
He used to complain all the time.
While Clemente was thrilled at the Pirates' upset over the Yankees in the 1960 World Series, he was bitter at having been overlooked for the league's MVP. He had driven in 94 runs, nearly twice the amount driven in by the writer's choice teammate Dick Groat. It wasn't so much that Groat won the award. It was that Clemente did not get the credit he felt he deserved.
Well, obviously, Bobby just felt that he didn't get a fair shake in the voting.
He just didn't trust him.
That distrust grew roots in 1960, a World Championship season in Pittsburgh. Shortstop Dick Groat, the National League batting leader at .325, was voted MVP. Clemente hit .314, but his 94 RBIs were nearly double those of his teammate.
After the season, Clemente's teammate was voted the league's most valuable player, even though Clemente's statistics were much better. Clemente, angered, blamed the voting due to the fact that he was a black Latino, fueling the rest of his career in his battle against racial barriers.
When he says, I did not deserve to finish 8th, and he spoke his mind, that was perhaps the first time he came out really in the open. I don't deserve this.
Despite others' devaluation of him, Clemente knew who he was and what he was worth. Keenly aware of the prevailing social order of mid-century America, Clemente often remarked that as a black Latino, he had 2 strikes against him.
And Bobby was highly insulted that he was 8th in the balloting, but there were never, although the news media wanted to make a big deal out of it, Bobby and I never once, in all the years we played together, had a crossword between us. In 1962 is the only time Bobby and I ever had words. It was over his not playing the second game of a doubleheader. When he said, I no play, I tired. I said, Bobby, Skinner's tired, Verdon's tired, Hoke's tired, Maz is tired, I'm tired. We need you to play. And he refused.
It's like an artist. When he painted a picture, he was on a baseball field and his body was his brush. And he wasn't going to put a piece of crap on the wall and sign his name to Roberto Clemente.
He said, they always said that I resented Groat not getting the MVP award. He said, I resented that I was voted 8th. I thought I shouldn't have been voted 8th.
It didn't really affect him. You know, he was disappointed that they're not recognizing me. I mean, what do I have to do and things like that? And so he just kept getting better. That's what he did.
So much better that the next season, Clemente hit .351 to win the batting crown. And nothing made him feel more appreciated than getting picked to both All-Star games that were held that year. He made the most of his appearance at the one in San Francisco's Candlestick Park when he came up in the bottom of the 10th.
The pitch by Wilhelm, swung on, and that's a drive right into right center. This may be it. Maris chasing the ball. Here's Mays rounding third. He's coming home to score. And that's the ball game. Mays scores. And the ball game is over.
From then on, a proud Clemente wore only his 1961 All-Star ring. By now, the rest of baseball was taking notice of the Pirates' great right fielder. But with recognition came the onerous comparisons to the standards of the time: Aaron, Mays, and Mantle.
And always talk about being hurt.
He was accused of malingering, that he imagined a lot of illnesses. He thought he wasn't treated fairly, and he felt that that was true of most of the Latinos
So every time we complain, they say we're faking. Hurt my knees playing ball, but I was afraid to complain because they said we complain too much.
When you asked Roberto how he felt, you know, how are you, Roberto? He thought you wanted to know. So if he had a headache, or his knee was sore, or he twisted his ankle, he'd say, I have a headache, or I twisted my knee. Everybody thought, well, he's always talking about how he's injured. But if you don't want to know how he felt, don't ask him, how are you, Roberto? This just wasn't a pleasantry in his mind. This was a question that you wanted an answer to.
I wrote this article about him for Sports Illustrated. The illustrator drew a full-page illustration of Clemente's body and labeled every place in his anatomy that he had ever reported an injury. So Clemente didn't speak to me for a year.
He was an incredibly proud man, and it infuriated him when they did that.
When he played baseball, he was doing it, and he was being very honest and very sincere about it, and as a result of that, I think that had a lot to do with how the press took to him. Roberto, he felt if someone asked him how he felt, he was being honest with them. And he would tell them that his back or his leg or whatever was bothering him. And they felt that he was complaining all the time, but in all reality, he was being very sincere about how he felt. But even more so, he went out and played with the problems that he had.
They used to ask me how you feel today. I said, well, I'm sore. And the next day they come and say, how you feel? I say, I'm sore.
He also suffered from an array of ailments, from bone chips to malaria to insomnia.
In Clemente's eyes, he could do nothing right where the press was concerned. He felt misunderstood and underappreciated, and those in the media felt that Clemente was cocky and difficult.
And always talk about how he didn't get his due.
Mays and Aaron and Mantle were hitting the home runs, so they captivated the media, and it kind of overshadowed Roberto a lot.
He was a tremendous ball player. The reason I think he might have not got the recognition because he was in Pittsburgh.
If you don't play in New York City, you know, one of those large cities, they didn't even think you was a baseball player.
So, I mean, he was not very popular with a lot of the great players.
A writer asked Roberto, you know, tried to compare him and Willie Mays. And Clemente was very simple with his answer. He said, for me, when I put the uniform on, I am the best player of the game. But he didn't try to say he was better than Willie or tried to put Willie down. So the next day in the paper, this guy wrote, Roberto Clemente say he's better than Willie Mays. And, you know, things like that used to make Roberto real mad, and I don't blame him.
When he says, for me, I'm the best in the world, you have to understand that Latins are sensitive and proud people. And if you ask a plumber or an engineer, are you any good? They'll say, for me, I am the best plumber on the island, or for me, I am the best engineer on the island. It's an assertion of self-respect and confidence in your ability.
A lot of people who did not know Roberto, the human being, like I did, would understand that his pride translated instantly into arrogance. He was not an arrogant guy.
I think there is a necessary ego on the part of any competitive athlete. I think without ego, you lack confidence. Ego really is a belief in yourself, a supreme belief in yourself. And Roberto had that. I don't think he was arrogant on a personal level, but he respected his own ability more than anybody else did because he recognized that if you don't, nobody else will.
He was very sincere about playing the game of baseball. He took an awful lot of pride in perfecting all the ins and outs of everything that, I mean, every minute detail he was concerned about.
Clemente answered his critics on the ball field. Playing the only way he knew how, he gave his all every step of the way. By the end of 1964, he had hit 300 or better 6 times, won 2 batting crowns, and with his now famous right arm, had won 4 consecutive Gold Gloves. After the 1964 season, Roberto's life was about to fill up even more. The previous winter in Puerto Rico, he had met a woman from his hometown of Carolina. Though Clemente barely spoke with Vera Zavala, when he saw her in a local drugstore, he knew even then he wanted to marry her.
That day when he saw me at the drugstore, his mother told me that he went back home
and he told her that he saw the girl that he will marry. And she asked him who was this girl, and he said, no, I don't know her, but I will marry her. Very, secure that he will marry me. We married the same year, November 14, 1964.
It was a storybook wedding, the most famous man in Puerto Rico and the most beautiful woman. And all of Carolina, it seemed, turned out.
There were over 1,000 people in that wedding. I remember they closed the main street of Carolina. The plaza was full of people, the same the church and around the church. And the celebration was in Fraternity in Rio Piedras, in Cupey. That was an event I will never forget it.
A year later, their first child, Roberto Jr., was born.
He felt that he was representing not only Puerto Ricans, but minorities. For him, he always felt that he needed to act to be able to be respected.
This was the whole period of the civil rights movement. Some of the athletes, they focused on the ball game, but Clemente was a very complex figure who was aware of his importance. He was an athlete, but at the same time, he was a spokesman for the Latin community.
Clemente was a complicated individual because he stepped into some very complicated times.
He was larger than the game he loved.
Well, I think one of the things that for him was a catalyst was meeting Dr. King and understanding that, when you are in a position to be able to be heard, you should voice your opinion. And I think the stage for him is to play baseball. There was only a vehicle for him to become the activist that he was.
He had a relationship with Martin Luther King. They met in Puerto Rico once in the mid-60s, and they spoke about what could be done to better race relations in the States.
I am very outspoken. I say when I feel something that not only about me, or I feel something that is injustice toward my teammate or somebody else, I want to say something about it.
Clemente was a very militant, a very vocal defender of the Latin American player, and I got him some enemies, and I got him some criticism.
The impact that he had in the Caribbean society, of the Hispanic society, was this uplifting belief that yes, we can achieve greatness in this sport.
In the Latin coaches, he's number one. One of the reasons why today we've been well known is because he was fighting for us.
To hear Felipe Alou say he's our Jackie Robinson, to see Sammy Sosa wear 21, play right field, he's our man.
It's about pride. It's about doing what he believes is right. It's about loyalty.
I mean, he's the one that, I understand that Jackie Robinson
broke a barrier. Roberto Clemente didn't break any barriers.
Well, to me, I think he broke the Latin American barrier.
No, he didn't.
Puerto Ricans and Latin Americans.
You think he was the first Latin American player to play in the major leagues?
No, I don't think that.
So then how did he break the barrier?
I mean, I think from being from Puerto Rico, that's what.
Yeah, but what barrier did he break? I don't understand. He wasn't the first player to play in the major leagues who was Spanish speaking, or Latin. What barrier did he break?
Jesus Christ.
He was baseball's first Latino superstar. Before America's pastime,
Roberto Clemente paved the way for Latinos in the major leagues.
He opened the door for Latino players and destroyed the racial barriers that stood between America and his people.
Clemente is the first athlete to transcend both race and nation and culture.
Roberto Clemente Walker's pride and humanitarianism won him universal admiration.
Roberto Clemente was a very inspirational person to me.
It'd be difficult for an American to measure the importance of Clemente's name in Latin America. He has been deified. He's a larger-than-life saint.
He was so influential not only on the field, but for his giving and his generosity with his time off the field. And
to me, he was the Jackie Robinson of the Latin. He was not the first Latin, but he was the one guy who spoke, who rose to the occasion. He had the credentials to do it.
It's hard to say that anyone was the equivalent of Jackie Robinson, but Clemente is the closest thing. He was not the first Latino ball player in the major leagues, but he was the first great one. And because of the way he played and the way he lived, he set in motion a huge migration of Latino ball players into the major leagues.
For many, many years, he always took time off in the winter to fly to different cities and different countries in order to help humanitarian efforts.
Roberto Clemente was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2002.
Roberto Clemente's legacy is not only being one of the all-time great players, but being one of the all-time great heroes. It's a wonderful legacy. I think he's one of those people that when you say Roberto Clemente, you smile. He was great in so many ways on and off the field.
Fabulous baseball player. Fabulous baseball player.
And today I think baseball celebrates his legacy not only on the field but obviously off the field, Steve. I mean, that's what these players receive awards based on humanitarian service.
I was put here to accomplish this one particular thing because I think what he was doing for, there's never been a Latin to make that achievement, and he was telling the Latin world that their accomplishment can be made. There is an avenue to success.
I don't think that I had never done this, what I had done in baseball, if that wasn't for defense. If that wasn't for the love that I have for the Puerto Rican people and for the love that I have for the Pittsburgh family, I'd never make it, never.
Celebrating him is as important as celebrating anybody else in the game because he popularized the game internationally as well.
He was the first Latino player inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Every year there's a documentary, there's a film, there's a book, there's a street, there's a playground, something named after Roberto Clemente. 40 years, that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen unless you're really, really somebody special.
If there's one person I want to emulate how I carry myself off the field, it definitely has to be Roberto Clemente.
I just don't see why he would get his number retired.
You need to shut the fuck up.
What an asshole.
As much as Clemente loved his adopted home of Pittsburgh, his true love was Puerto Rico, and the people of Puerto Rico adored him. He couldn't walk down the street without getting a hug or a handshake.
He always was proud to be Puerto Rican. I even have to fly from Pittsburgh to Puerto Rico for our children to born here. He didn't want them to born in Pittsburgh. He wanted them to born here where we born.
Clemente's love for children was a guiding force in his life. In addition to his own, he embraced children everywhere. In the winters in Puerto Rico, he would give coaching clinics and spend time talking with kids. In 1965, Clemente won his second straight batting title, his third overall. And yet he felt he was still under-recognized.
When I came to Pittsburgh in 1966, Jimmy Cannon was a big New York sports writer, one of the best respected men, and he said to me in '66, "You're going to a town that may have the greatest player in the game, and nobody knows it."
But opponents knew full well who Clemente was. He didn't have the power of Mays or Aaron, but he played a style of baseball few players had ever seen. His own scouting report didn't offer pitchers much hope.
No, they always pitch me the same way. I don't know how they pitch to me. They don't know how they're going to pitch to me. They pitch me one way, and most of the time they try to keep the ball away from me and come inside lots of time with inside pitch on me and then go away again. They've been pitching me the same way for 12 years. I don't think they're going to change now. I don't think so.
Clemente was the National League MVP in 1966 and played in 15 All-Star games.
End the game and the series with victory for the Pirates.
No less a hitter at age 36, Clemente hit .352 in 1970 and led the Pirates to a division title. Meanwhile, Clemente continued to pile up the milestones, among them 12 gold gloves.
Clemente earned National League MVP honors in 1966, but achieved his greatest fame in the 1971 World Series when he batted .414.
No one gave the Pirates much of a chance against a team that had 4 20-game winners.
Of NBC News.
But a nationwide audience was about to see Pittsburgh's great star put on the show of his life.
You know, George, when you talk about Roberto and his hitting exploits, a lot of people really didn't get a chance to see him until 1971 World Series.
How did he play in the World Series against the Orioles?
George, that was Roberto's moment of glory because the entire world
watch the 1971 World Series.
Clemente set the stage by declaring to the national press, "Nobody does anything better than me in baseball."
All the skeptics that thought that Hank Aaron or Willie Mays was much better than Clemente, I'm going to show even those guys that I am as good as they are, or better.
Roberto Clemente, a .440 hitter in the World Series. And Clemente has done it all for the Pirates here in the 71 series.
Cuellar ready in the pitch, and Clemente gets a good charge on the ball.
That is hit well. A Clemente home run, and the Pirates lead 1-0. That is hit well. A Clemente home run, and the Pirates lead 1-0.
Nobody hit 400 off our pitching staff. Maybe off of one pitcher. You know, a guy might have one guy's number, but not our whole staff.
That's not to say that Mays and Aaron are any less than a Clemente, but certainly, how can they be any better? We're watching Buford, and he cannot get to it. Here is Clemente again, on his way for three. Belanger off the mark, and Clemente has tripled.
Bobby Clemente continues to totally annihilate Baltimore pitching.
He carried us on his back. We showed up to the World Series that year, and we took our positions. That's all we did. Just showed up.
One hit in each contest, extending his World Series streak to 14. With a .414 batting average and a crucial home run in Game 7, he was named MVP.
The greatest right fielder in the game of baseball, Roberto Clemente.
People took a different look at Roberto Clemente. I think people really thought that this is one of the all-time great ball players, if they didn't think that before.
I say anything in English, I would like to say something for my mother and father in Spanish.
I think Roberto did mature as he went along. Also, I think the American public became more comfortable with him. But it took a long time for America to appreciate him.
En el día más grande de mi vida, para los nenes, la bendición mía y que mi padre me eche mi bendición en Puerto Rico.
The Latinos who were listening to that were watching the English language TV. To have someone suddenly speak to you in Spanish reinforced a pride in your own language and culture and in who Roberto was.
On national English TV, to take a little break at the top of the question, say, "Excuse me, but I really need to send the message back home." That tells you how important his background was for him.
In his last regular season game of 1972, Roberto Clemente became the 11th player of all time and the first Latino in history to reach 3,000 hits.
Matlack on the 0-1. 2 balls and 2 strikes to Roberto Clemente. Here's the pitch on a shot into the gap in left center. This will be in for a base hit. Bobby hits a drive into the gap in the left center field. There's the end.
It was just as it should be, just a classic picture. A ringing double to left center field. He just pulls up very comfortably in second base, and just the very essence of dignity and pride, standing there with the hands on hips, very naturally, nothing is staged, and he is the king.
Maybe extra bases. No question about this one. A double for Clemente. His 3,000th hit, and the ballpark just goes wild as Roberto Clemente becomes the 11th man in baseball history to collect 3,000 base hits. Papers flying, everybody standing. A double for Roberto.
When he took that pose, I have that image of him standing there. It wasn't jumping up and down, it wasn't jubilation, it was a quiet gesture of, yes, I've done this, and I acknowledge all of you, and here I am.
There wasn't that many people getting 3,000 hits or had gotten it. And he certainly wanted to be one of them because he felt that he could play the game as well as anyone, and he could.
Roberto Clemente reaching 3,000 hits allowed him to reach a milestone that Babe Ruth hadn't reached, that Lou Gehrig hadn't reached, that Mickey Mantle hadn't reached. It showed that this was an all-time great player.
On September 30th, 1972, Clemente became the 11th player in history to reach 3,000 hits.
Bobby hits a drive into the gap in the left center field. There's the end.
Clemente's landmark hit came in his last regular season at bat. Almost 3 months later, he was at home in San Juan when a major earthquake struck Managua, Nicaragua.
Since I met him, he was always talking about death.
He was always insisting that he was going to die young, always. I said, well, don't talk about sad things, you know. And I said, no, you will see. I know I will die young.
When alive, like I said before, you never know because God tells you how long you're going to be here. So you never know what can happen tomorrow. I would say that if everything goes well, I should get it before the All-Star game next year.
No one knew it then, but that would be the last game Clemente ever played. On December 23, 1972, an earthquake hit Nicaragua, killing thousands and leaving tens of thousands homeless. The month before, Clemente was here managing an amateur team. He loved the people, and in trying to help, went on Puerto Rican TV and made a plea for donations.
Pusieron el corazón de Nicaragua a los pies de los puertorriqueños.
We treat him like a king down there in Nicaragua because he deserved that. He was one of the, the hero in Latin American. So he didn't hesitate. He really appreciated what we did for him when he was down there, that he was willing to do whatever he was capable to do to help us.
There were reports that the collected relief supplies from Puerto Rico were being sold to the survivors of the earthquake in Managua by members of the Nicaraguan National Guard. He told Vera that if they were selling those supplies and he went there, he would stop it. They wouldn't do that with Roberto Clemente there.
On New Year's Eve, Clemente boarded a relief plane bound for Managua. A makeshift crew was in command of the DC-7, which itself had mechanical problems and was overloaded with emergency supplies.
I had gone back to Puerto Rico to play winter ball, and I just told Roberto that I'd be glad to help him any way I could. Roberto had organized this, had gotten a friend to donate an airplane. The owner was the pilot. I had asked Roberto, I'd like to go along and help you unload the plane and come back. And that's when he said, no, you need to go and party. It's New Year's Eve. And that's really the last conversation I had with the man.
The man of the people was true to his word. On the night of December 31st, Clemente boarded a plane full of supplies, despite a premonition from Roberto Jr.
His son begged him not to go. He had a premonition that something was going to happen.
I said, I asked him if he was leaving. I said not to leave because the plane was going to crash. I told him, I repeated that 3 times. They kind of, screamed at me because of saying that.
After we said goodbye, he stayed on the door. I would stay standing there, and he had a very sad look, very deep and very sad look. I can never forget that look.
I cried for a while and went outside. He came out, he gave me a hug and a kiss, and he said that he would see me when he got back, and that was it.
His wife Vera didn't want him to go, but he went because he cared.
On January 1st, 1973, off the coast of Puerto Rico, a helicopter scanned the seas for a plane that had crashed the night before. The airplane carried 5 passengers on their way to extend aid to earthquake-stricken Nicaragua. The Puerto Rican people joined in the search because one of their true heroes was on that plane. His name was Roberto Clemente, and they would never see him again.
Another plane crash last night. A 4-engine DC-7 loaded with supplies for Nicaraguan earthquake victims fell into the ocean after takeoff from San Juan, Puerto Rico. Among 5 persons aboard, Pittsburgh Pirates baseball superstar Roberto Clemente.
Roberto Clemente headed up relief efforts in his native Puerto Rico for victims of the Nicaraguan earthquake. Late last night, he was killed when a cargo plane that he was aboard crashed shortly after takeoff from San Juan.
Tragically, Clemente's life ended at age 38, the victim of a plane crash while flying relief supplies to Nicaraguan earthquake victims.
The DC-7 plane, rumored to be in poor condition, plunged into the sea just after takeoff, about 1.5 miles offshore. Puerto Rico's beloved Clemente was gone.
The whole house was full of people. I'm like, what's going on? You know, I didn't realize what happened at the time. Till finally we walked in my mother's room, and you know, that was it. You know, my mom grabbed us. She was crying. All my, my close family was there, and for a while, I'll be honest with you, for a while I thought, you know, I didn't really realize what really happened, and then I would cry by myself when I realized that I would never see him again.
Remembering the day itself, helping load the plane, and I can still see it in my mind. I've never been able to erase it. I still have an image of Roberto that is stuck with me, alive, and I'm grateful for that. But I'm deeply saddened that I was there. I was probably one of the last people to see him alive.
I was in Milwaukee at the time. I was listening to the 5 o'clock news and heard that his plane had gone down. It was probably one of the saddest days of my life.
It was the loss of a national hero. The only thing I can think of that in my own lifetime like it is when President Kennedy was killed. It was that kind of a thing. It sort of sent a wave of sadness throughout the whole country.
When Roberto was killed, it was just stunning. I remember my heart sinking that New Year's Eve. When such a great athlete is killed in his prime, I remember being crushed. I wasn't a Pittsburgh fan. I was just a sports fan. I think it was devastating.
Clemente, by the time he died, was the patron saint of Latin American baseball. When word of his death arose, hundreds and hundreds of people drove to Pinones Beach near San Juan, Puerto Rico, where the plane went down, thinking that Clemente might walk out of the water.
You know, his death was a tragic thing, and it kind of hurt me because I had gotten really close to him, you know. But he brought the winning attitude, you know. It's like we're gonna win every day, and that's what he did.
It was almost like, well, he was put here for the purpose of making a certain accomplishment, and this is exactly what he did.
His life ended making a trip to some needy families in Nicaragua. It's very unfortunate, but I think it really describes who he was as a person, a very giving person.
Back in Pittsburgh, the reaction was equally devastating.
After Roberto Clemente's accidental death, his number, 21, familiar to so many fans, was retired by the pirate management. Present at the ceremony were his wife, his 3 young children, and his pirate teammates.
It was like a morgue in the office, but the telephones never quit. Fans just had to call and express themselves in some way. They had to do something. They just had to call and say something to somebody. They had to be consoled in their own way. And the mail that we got in was just volumes and volumes of mail and tributes in poems and letters and whatever way. It was a very tough time for a lot of people.
The pirates chartered a plane for Puerto Rico, where they paid their respects to a man who had touched so many lives.
A 3-day period of mourning was declared in Puerto Rico. The pirates chartered a plane to attend a memorial service in their fallen hero's hometown of Carolina. Despite an outpouring of grief, the loss of Roberto Clemente at 38 was too much for some to accept.
Manny Sanguillen, the catcher for the Pirates, refused to believe that Roberto was dead and would go out into the ocean and literally look for the plane and look for Roberto floating.
I wanted to look for my friend. That was in my mind, that he was down there. And I gonna see him.
He had to die like that for all the world to know what kind of a man he was.
There's something about early death, especially if it's under heroic circumstances. There's tragedy along with all the glory.
We remember his vitality, his grace, his agility, his exuberance on the playing field, where he was so thrilling to watch. You chose to bring to a close his life as he attempted to help others to live. We ask that his memory will continue to enliven us in showing proper respect for the precious gift of life in ourselves and our fellow man, wherever he be.
I think part of the mystique of Roberto Clemente is the fact that they never found his body. There was no sense of closure.
It's not just a death, it's a hero's death. A lot of athletes do wonderful things, but they don't die doing them.
He died when he was in his way to my country, Nicaragua, and tried to help the guys after a disaster happened over there.
Only 3 months after his death, Roberto Clemente became the first Latino ever to be inducted into baseball's Hall of Fame.
8 months after the crash, Clemente was inducted into the Hall of Fame, the first Latin American player so honored. In 18 years, he batted .317, was an All-Star 14 times, and won 12 Gold Gloves. That day in August 1973, Clemente was inducted alongside his boyhood hero, Monty Irvin.
Roberto Clemente was inducted into baseball's Hall of Fame. The rule that a player is not eligible until 5 years after his last active year was waived. Roberto's wife was there to accept the honor.
I want to thank the Commission of Baseball, the members of the Hall of Fame, the baseball writers, the Pittsburgh Pirates Association, and all the people who made this event possible. This is Roberto's last triumph, and if he were here, he would dedicate to our people of Puerto Rico, our people in Pittsburgh, and to all his fans throughout the United States. Thank you.
3 months following his death, Roberto Clemente was voted into the Hall of Fame by a special ballot, 5 years before he would have been eligible. He was the first Latino to be inducted into Cooperstown.
The Hall of Fame stuff was pretty cool, but as a human, for me, made me more proud that he was a person that really cared about the other people and the other nations.
I think Clemente really is one of the greatest who ever lived. He didn't have Ted Williams' batting eye, he didn't have Joe DiMaggio's grace, he didn't have Lou Brock's speed. He just had enough of everything. And he had a heart that was bigger than River Stadium.
When he was done, the big picture that he signed was a study in brilliant play. Although Clemente only hit 240 homers, his .317 lifetime batting average was higher than that of Mays, Mantle, or Aaron. In the 18 seasons that he ruled the right field corner, he remade the neighborhood. By the early 1970s, almost half the Pirates were either black like him or spoke his native language. Only then did he relax.
He could talk for half hour, 45 minutes and keep you laughing for 45 minutes. And he never did that stuff early in the 50s.
If I was doing something wrong, all he needed to do was look at me. He just, boom, looked at me. I would stop whatever I was doing. I would even stop breathing.
You saw Roberto, you saw a serious individual. Even though he may have been happy inside for X reason, he did not project joy. And if you didn't know him well, that's the impression you got. He's a rough guy.
Beneath that stony visage was a plan in progress.
He brought that kind of passion to almost everything in his life. When he ordered a cup of coffee in the morning, it was intense.
Very rarely, we see a man who seems to have met all the demands, challenged all the implacable averages, spurned the mere luck. He has defied baseball, even altered it, and for a time at least, the game is truly his.
His sacrifice for others, he of course died in a plane crash trying to go help earthquake victims in Nicaragua, made him a legend.
Number 21, Roberto Clemente.